Thank you so much for that message and song. It was beautiful. Thank you, choir. Thank you, brass. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone. Bells were amazing this morning. I hope you feel like you have been to worship because you have. Our young people are now making their way over here, if they would like, 4th through 3rd grade, and make their way over here to Worship and Wonder Space, and they will guide our young ones back around where they will enjoy a time of worship that is story and feast together. Our text this morning comes from Luke chapter 24, starting in verse 1. Hear these words. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. And the women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the 3rd day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up, ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen clothes by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened. The grass in my front yard refuses to grow. That is just a reality. Ever since we moved into that house, right before Knox, our youngest son, was born, he is 7 now. 7 long years of no grass in the front yard. We have 2 giant oak trees that were planted, who knows what year, and we believe that they are the culprits to the no grass. Their shade prevents sun from getting to them all throughout the day, and in the fall time, there are like billions of acorns that come down, and apparently there's something with acorns and acid. We put down gypsum, we've fertilized, we have planted seeds, we have put sod down. This grass is a true Missouri native. They are stubborn as all get out. So we gave up and we called a service. We called the lawn service. And we said, "Please come make the grass grow." And it was just like that, pleading and tired and weary, that I called them. And they said, "Sure," for a lot of money. And so for 2 years, I was handing money over fist. And for 2 years, the grass still wouldn't grow. So I did the only sensible thing. I got on the phone at the beginning of this grass growing season and said, "We're going to have to cancel our service." Now, have you ever tried to cancel a service? Think about the last time you had to call your phone company or your trash company. I've heard stories already this morning about internet, trying to cancel and shift to another internet service provider. It is a chore, one that I was born for. Because I, too, am a Missouri native, stubborn as all get out. And I get on the phone. And it's amazing, because when you're on the phone trying to cancel a service, they throw everything at you. We'll give you a deal like you've never heard of. We will give you our firstborn child. No thanks, I have 2. Good. We will do anything to keep you as a customer. No, thank you. You've tried for 2 years, and I don't blame you. I think it's the oak trees, and I can't afford to take those down. So you're gone. I need to get rid of it. And they finally give me what I am longing for. not only words, a verbal sort of agreement that they're going to stop service, but as soon as they do that, they give me a confirmation number. That is solid gold. That is what all customers are looking for when they're trying to cancel a service, because you get that confirmation number, and if they forget or they mess up and they come do it anyways, and they give you that bill for the thing that they've done, then you can say, I have a confirmation number. You gave your word. You wouldn't come back out and try to make this stubborn grass grow, and yet here you are trying to charge me more money. I have proof. I have evidence. I have all that I need to prove that, in fact, you said you wouldn't come back. We are all of us at different points in our journey looking for confirmation. We find our disciples this morning headed to the tomb. These disciples were going to fulfill a burial rite in the Jewish tradition in the first century world, where they would go and they would anoint the body with oil and spices. It was part of their burial practice. And when they got there, they saw that the stone in front of the tomb was already moved. And so they go ahead, nervously, unsure of what they would find. They step into the tomb and see nothing. It is empty. The only thing there are the burial clothes, the shroud that was wrapped around Jesus. And they begin to grow suspicious and nervous and unsure. They begin to wonder, what can this possibly mean? They begin to grieve and ask questions like, why, or what has happened here? When all of a sudden, out of nowhere, two men in dazzling clothes show up, and they sort of tell them or ask them, why are you looking for the living among the dead? Don't you remember what Jesus told to you when you all were preaching in the Galilee, when you were all caring for people in ministry? Don't you remember what Jesus said to you many times, that he would be handed over into the hands of sinners, but he would eventually come back to life, new life, resurrection? The scripture says they remembered his words. And through remembering, they found all that they needed. In fact, in Luke, this is the only telling of the resurrection story where Jesus himself does not show up. Does not show up. Jesus shows up to the male disciples on the roads to Emmaus. Jesus shows up to the group of men, disciples gathered there in the upper room. Shows up. But the women of faith, these disciples, women, they went to the tomb, found it empty, remembered Jesus' words, and that's all the confirmation they needed. They ran back to tell the others, you won't believe what we have seen. You won't believe what we have heard. Jesus is not dead. He is alive. They go back and tell the disciples, and they all pass it off as an idle tale, the scripture says. They needed more proof, more evidence. They needed something more. They needed confirmation for themselves. I like this telling of the resurrection story. I like the faith of these women disciples who got up early. And I often ask myself, why did they go to the tomb? I know it was part of their burial ritual, but they had just seen Jesus executed for his preaching and teaching. Were they not afraid of what might happen to them if someone found them caring for this person who was crucified? Yet they went. They felt that call of faith, or maybe they just were Missouri stubborn, and they went anyways, knowing what might happen. And they came back filled to the brim with this story, this faith, this empty tomb. Faith is a strange thing. It's a strange word I've been just throwing around this morning, willy-nilly. Talking about faith, it's mysterious. Faith doesn't always come with confirmation numbers. It doesn't always come with hard evidence or proof. In fact, that's not really the nature of faith, after all. I remember the evangelist Billy Graham once said, "I've never seen the wind. I've seen the effects of wind, but I've never seen the wind. It's a mystery." Now, I don't agree with everything that Reverend Billy Graham said, but that quote always stuck with me. This idea that faith, that God, that this resurrection story we tell every Easter, that there's a mystery to it. Confirmation and evidence goes like it's paradoxical when put next to a mystery. For once you solve the mystery, it's no longer a mystery. You understand what it was leading you to. But that's not the way it is with God, or even with this resurrection story. It's a story that we live into. Sure, we can read about it. Sure, we can hear it preached about. We can hear it sung about. We can connect to it in some meaningful way. And we do get drawn into this tale of this empty tomb. And we do get drawn closer to God, but there's still a mystery. Many people throughout history have claimed to have experiences with the resurrected Christ. Not just the disciples in the upper room, but Paul as well, who saw Jesus not in physical form, but as a blinding light and a voice from the heavens. Stories like the story of Teresa of Avila, who saw Jesus in a vision, a dream. Countless people throughout history in our tradition of faith that we tell over and over again, people who have experienced Jesus, the risen Christ. That's the nature of faith. It's something we experience or feel or know deep down that there is this greater mystery, this greater force, this love that we are connected to in some powerful and meaningful way. We are on this faith journey together. We are longing to connect with the story of Jesus, but I think sometimes we look and hold on to the past, to the traditions we passed on from generation to generation. It's why we tell this story every year on this particular Sunday. We remind ourselves that the tomb was empty, that Jesus lives, and we get so focused on the past that we forget to see what is happening right in front of us. So too do I think people of faith sometimes set their sights on the future, waiting for a second coming of Jesus, waiting for some day down the road when Jesus will appear once more. But I think sometimes our energy is wasted looking too far ahead or looking too far in the past. When it's not a Jesus of the past or a Jesus of the future that we serve, it is the living Christ that is with us right here, right now, in this room that we are called to follow. What if I were to tell you that Jesus is right here in this room right now? What would you say if I were to tell you that I see Jesus every time I hear a young person preach about hope and new life in the midst of despair and darkness? What would you do if I were to tell you that I see Jesus every time I look in the face of a stranger longing for food or shelter? What if I were to tell you that I see Jesus every time we gather around this table Sunday after Sunday and break bread and share the cup together, even though we don't hold the same political ideals, even though we don't understand God in the exact same way, even though we don't even have the same values, that I see Jesus? What if I were to tell you I see Jesus every time some young person steps into the waters of baptism and emerges, not with all the answers, not with their journey over and done now that they've made that decision, but witnessing someone at the very beginning of a lifelong journey in the mystery of God. Friends, if you have come here this morning looking or longing for a confirmation number, I don't have one for you. And I think anyone who claims that they have the proof or the evidence is not being entirely faithful. We are still learning more and more about God. We don't have the mystery all figured out. We're still learning more and more about resurrection and new life in the midst of all the struggles that we face with all the loss and heartache we experience. We're learning more and more, but we don't have all the answers yet. But if you're looking for confirmation that Jesus is alive, look no further than the person to your right or your left. Look no further than this table. Look no further than the places in our community longing to be brought together through reconciliation and healing. I see Jesus everywhere. I hope you do too.